From the dawn of time we came, moving silently down through the centuries, living many secret lives, struggling to reach the time of the gathering, when the few who remain will battle to the last. No one has ever known we were among you, until now.
Welcome to Man vs. Movies, the channel where cult classics get their due, whether they've aged like fine wine or expired milk. Today, we're unsheathing our broadswords for Highlander, the fantasy action epic that screamed, "There can be only one," then immediately contradicted itself with sequels, a TV series, an anime, and now an upcoming reboot starring Henry Cavill, who apparently looked at The Witcher and thought, needs more lightning decapitations.
Fuck.
But before all that franchise sprawl, let's go back to where it began, when immortals ruled the streets of New York swinging swords like it was a Renaissance fair on meth. In Highlander, the 1986 cult classic that combines fantasy, action, rock ballads and trench coats, immortals walk among us. Mysterious warriors who don't age, can't die, unless you decapitate them, which seems like a design flaw, and aren't allowed to have kids. Immortality, it turns out, is mostly loneliness, dramatic coat flapping, and a lot of awkward small talk when people ask why you haven't aged since the Middle Ages. These immortals are locked in a century-spanning game, a mystical battle royale where the only rule is, there can be only one. Well, technically there are a few rules. For example, no fighting on holy ground, because nothing ruins a cathedral service like a couple of immortals drop-kicking each other through stained glass.
I have something to say. It's better to burn out than to fade away.
And when one immortal defeats another, they experience the Quickening, a mystical energy transfer that involves spontaneous lightning storms, seizure-inducing special effects, and a lot of yelling. Think of it as a spiritual upgrade via electrocution. As time goes on and more heads hit the floor, the remaining immortals feel an irresistible pull toward a distant land, an event ominously called The Gathering. Think Coachella, but with fewer wristbands and more swordplay. There, the final battle would decide who wins the prize, which may be the secret of life, unlimited power, or just the right to finally take a nap without looking over your shoulder. The film's protagonist, Connor MacLeod, is a Scottish immortal with an identity crisis, a collection of antique swords, and a face that says, "I've seen some things." He broods his way through centuries of heartbreak, betrayal, and sword fights in increasingly impractical locations. Along the way, he's mentored by a mysterious immortal played by Sean Connery, who shows up dressed like a pirate, sounding like Scotland, and claiming to be Spanish Egyptian. Don't ask, it was the 80s. Logic was on sabbatical. The movie shifts between sweeping Scottish landscapes and gritty neon-soaked New York City, all set to a soundtrack by Queen that somehow makes everything feel like a rock opera written by Zeus. It's bold, ridiculous, heartfelt, and completely unapologetic. Highlander is the ultimate 80s fantasy action cult film. If you love immortals with tragic pasts, sword fights powered by lightning, absurdly specific supernatural rules, or just want to watch Sean Connery pretend to be literally anyone but Scottish, this is your movie. The whole saga began with Gregory Wyden, a UCLA film student who wrote Highlander as part of a screenwriting class. Inspired by a visit to Scotland and a little too much brooding around castles, he imagined immortal warriors battling across the ages. He sold the script for $200,000. Back when that could buy you a house, a DeLorean, and maybe a really nice sword. Now, Wyden's original draft was darker and more introspective. It had more time travel, more existential dread, and fewer Freddie Mercury high notes. But as Hollywood does, it passed through several rewrites, especially by Peter Bellwood and Larry Ferguson, who decided the best way to explain immortality was to never really explain it at all. But hey, it worked. Russell Mulcahy burst onto the cinematic scene like a guy who accidentally wandered off the set of a Duran Duran video and yelled, "Where's the fog machine?" Before directing Highlander, he basically invented the MTV aesthetic. Fast cuts, dramatic lighting, slow motion wind, and enough eyeliner to sink a battleship. He directed Video Killed the Radio Star, the very first music video ever aired on MTV. He was there at the birth of modern music television, which explains why Highlander sometimes feels like a Queen video crashed into Braveheart and everyone just ran with it. He also directed Razorback, a horror movie about a giant killer pig in the Australian outback, because nothing says promising debut like hog-based homicide. Mulcahy's camera work is wild, slick, and soaked in fog machines. It's like Blade Runner met the Princess Bride and then got drunk in a neon-lit alley. But credit where it's due, he gave Highlander its visual identity, and when someone asked, "Why does it look like this?" the correct answer is,
because it's awesome.
After Highlander, he returned for the infamous Highlander 2, The Quickening, a movie so confusing even the laws of physics walked out halfway through. A French actor playing a Scotsman, surrounded by Scots playing Egyptians, pretending to be Spanish. Christopher Lambert is the only actor who could play a Scottish Highlander while sounding like a guy who learned English from a cassette tape labelled Vaguely European Mystery Man. Born in New York, raised in Switzerland and France, he brought a unique accent to the role that screamed international school tuition. He rose to fame as a smouldering loincloth-clad jungleman in Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, where his dialogue was minimal and his hair voluminous. But in Subway, Lambert truly unleashed his inner new wave cryptid, playing a bleach blonde oddball living in the Paris metro. Imagine David Bowie trapped in an underground rave with no concept of rent. By the time Highlander rolled around, Lambert couldn't see more than a foot in front of him due to extreme myopia. That's right, he did all those sword fights and brooding stares practically blind, which might explain why he always looks like he's trying to make out the menu at a drive-thru. Lambert also barely spoke English at the time and learned his lines phonetically, so when you hear him say, "I am Connor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod," like he's ordering cheese, now you know why. But weirdly, it works. He's got a haunted look and brooding energy that somehow sells it. He later starred in Mortal Kombat as the most heavily accented Japanese thunder god in cinematic history. And yes, he came back for multiple Highlander sequels, proving that immortality is only slightly more stubborn than a recurring paycheck. There are actors, there are legends, and then there's Sean Connery, who refused to change his accent for any role, even when it's a Scotsman playing an Egyptian immortal posing as a Spaniard. I repeat, a Scotsman playing an Egyptian pretending to be Spanish, mentoring a Frenchman pretending to be Scottish.
You serious?
You couldn't make this up unless you were very drunk or a casting director in the 1980s. Of course, Connery was already world famous for being the original James Bond, slapping bad guys and sipping martinis before most of the cast was out of diapers. He went on to win an Oscar for The Untouchables, steal Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and yell,
Welcome to the Rock.
in a movie where he essentially plays James Bond with arthritis. He filmed his scenes under a week, collected $1 million paycheck, wore eyeliner, and strutted around in peacock feathers like Zorro on holiday. In short, absolute king behaviour.
It's good to be the king.
He retired after the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, because if you're going to bow out, why not do it while punching vampires in a steampunk submarine? Clancy Brown entered Highlander like a biker who took a wrong turn into a lightning storm and decided to start decapitating strangers. As the Kurgan, he's part demon, part pro wrestler, and 100% nightmare fuel. He's an absolute scene-stealing monster. With a voice like gravel and a haircut like a post-apocalyptic Mr. Clean, Brown turns the Kurgan into one of the best villains of the 80s. Before terrorising the Immortals, Brown played a tough guy in Bad Boys with Sean Penn. After Highlander, he became Hollywood's favourite gravel-voiced villain. From the sadistic guard in The Shawshank Redemption, to the helpful, but still scary, drill sergeant in Starship Troopers. You probably also know him as Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob SquarePants, proving once and for all that he's just as terrifying whether he's screaming, "There can be only one," or haggling over Krabby Patties. As the Kurgan, he's terrifying, hilarious, and clearly having the time of his life. Roxanne Hart plays Brenda Wyatt, a forensic pathologist who falls for a man who owns multiple swords and happens to be near every decapitated body she investigates. In real life, that's a red flag. In Highlander, it's a swipe right. She's a Tony-nominated stage actress and had a solid TV run on shows like Chicago Hope, Medium and Hung. Hart brought class and sincerity to a movie otherwise filled with immortal murderers and lightning bolts. Her character asks the tough questions like, why are heads flying off again? But ultimately decides that love conquers all, even weird accents and felony assault. Alan North plays the perpetually exasperated NYPD lieutenant who has to make sense of ritualistic decapitations in parking garages. He delivers his lines with the kind of resigned authority that says, "I was going to retire, but now I've got to solve Highlander homicide." You may remember him from Police Squad as the original Captain Hokin before the Naked Gun recast the role with George Kennedy.
Frank, you better take somebody with you. Get a hold of Officer Norberg, tell him to drop whatever he's doing, get up here on the double. Yes, Captain.
Either way, he was always dependable as the guy who does not have time for this. North was a professional that guy, showing up in films like Glory, Serpico, and anything requiring a serious face and a slowly increasing migraine. James Cosmo plays Connor MacLeod's adopted father, Angus, a simple Highland farmer who just wants a peaceful life, but instead ends up with a son who can't die and brings ruin to every village picnic. He gives heartfelt speeches, tosses dirty looks at the clergy, and rocks a beard that could defeat most modern razors. Cosmo went on to become cinema's go-to grizzled dad figure. If the movie needs someone to solemnly stare into a fire before dying nobly, he's your man. He's been in Braveheart, Trainspotting, Troy, Narnia, and of course Game of Thrones as Jean Mormont. Yet another character doomed to give good advice before being eaten by plot. James Cosmo is the cinematic equivalent of a warm mug of scotch and a bagpipe solo. Comforting, intimidating, and probably about to tell you to be brave, lad. Filming for Highlander officially began in April 1985, and in true Immortal fashion, bounced through centuries and continents over the course of 3 chaotic months. The production kicked off in the Scottish Highlands, where Connor MacLeod gallivants across moody landscapes like an emotionally distant action figure in a high-budget whiskey commercial. Most of these sweeping shots were captured around Eileen Doonan Castle and Glencoe, both so picturesque they've appeared in more movies than half the cast. It's the perfect setting for shouting, "I am Connor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod," to absolutely no one on the hillside while dodging freezing rain, gale force winds, and the occasional rogue sheep. From there, the crew trekked through Loch Shiel and other rugged terrains where the hills roll like Connery's R's and every gust of wind sounds like a war cry. The cinematography is stunning. As long as you're into mist, mud, and sword fights so intense, they could cut through centuries of emotional repression. Then, without warning, we're in 1980s New York City, where fashion has flatlined and neon signs scream louder than the pedestrians. Connor now resides in an apartment that looks like an antique store owned by a vampire with hoarding issues. The iconic sword fight in the Madison Square Garden parking garage delivers all the gritty romanticism of clanging blades beside oil stains and the distant sound of a hot dog vendor threatening to stab someone over mustard. But here's the twist. Most of that New York isn't New York at all. It's London in disguise. Budget constraints meant director Russell Mulcahy had to pull a Death Wish 3 and fake Manhattan using British alleyways dressed up with American signage, dim lighting, and sheer hope. If you squint and imagine a taxi honking, you might not notice the red phone box lurking just out of frame. Filming in London also included key interiors, like the lavish candle-drenched set of Ramirez's castle, which was so thick with artificial smoke it looked like a haunted sauna or the inside of a Bonnie Tyler music video. The final rooftop battle, soaked in water and electricity, was filmed in a custom-built soundstage and is basically the world's most dangerous slip and slide, complete with sparks, mirrors, and Mulcahy's relentless obsession with dramatic reflections. By July 1985, principal photography wrapped. Post-production dragged into early 1986 as editors frantically stitched together centuries of sword fights, flashbacks, and Queen's thunderous soundtrack while trying to make sense of a story where logic was sacrificed at the altar of spectacle. So where was Highlander filmed? The short answer, everywhere and nowhere. The filmmakers chose locations like a blindfolded tourist spinning a globe, confidently, dramatically, and with zero regard for continuity. The end result? A globe-trotting fantasy epic where geography is irrelevant, time is elastic, and if a location would let them plug in a lighting machine without asking questions, it made the cut. Coherence? Optional. Vibes? Immaculate. And now for one of Highlander's secret weapons, the music. Composer Michael Kamen provides a soaring orchestral score that somehow makes sword fights feel operatic instead of ridiculous. But the real crown jewel is Queen, who wrote multiple songs for the film. Not just any songs. Princes of the Universe, Who Wants to Live Forever, and A Kind of Magic. Freddie Mercury's vocals hit harder than the Kurgan's sword, and the songs elevate the movie into something transcendent. It's not just a fantasy flick, it's a rock opera with decapitations. What more do you want? When Highlander released in 1986, it tanked at the US box office. Critics were confused. Audiences were unsure what they had just watched. But it quietly built a cult following thanks to home video, where it found its true immortals, nerds, goths, and sword-obsessed teens who knew greatness when they saw it. It became a VHS staple, like pizza rolls for the soul. Over time, people started appreciating the unique blend of fantasy, action, and existential angst. And of course, Queen. Now let's talk legacy, because Highlander did what it said it wouldn't. It spawned many. Highlander 2: The Quickening, widely considered one of the worst sequels of all time, it makes the Immortals aliens from the planet Zeist, gives everyone space armor, and has Sean Connery resurrected by magic Shakespeare. It's an absolute disaster, and an unintentional comedy goldmine, and it's a total guilty pleasure for me. Highlander 3: The Sorcerer tries to pretend the second movie didn't happen. Honestly, same as most people. Highlander Endgame, a crossover with the TV show's Duncan MacLeod, proving even immortals suffer from franchise fatigue. Highlander: The Source. Let's just move on. There was also the TV series starring Adrian Paul as Duncan MacLeod, which developed its own massive following. It ran for 6 seasons and handled the mythology better than most of the films. So, here we are. Highlander is messy, weird, beautiful, and unforgettable. It's a film where the rules are murky, the accents are murkier, but the vibes are immaculate. It's the kind of movie where a Frenchman with a katana fights a grueling maniac in a leather trench coat while Queen blasts in the background. It shouldn't work, but it absolutely does. It's lightning in a bottle. But then someone tried to make 5 more bottles of it using glue and regret. If you've never seen it, fix that immediately. And if you have, watch it again. Because as far as I'm concerned,
there can be only one. One.